Hello, my name is Antonio Urquizar Herrera. I am professor of art history at the History of Art department in the Universidad Nacional de Educación a Distancia in Madrid, Spain. I am part of the teaching staff of the MOOC Material Culture of Islam in Europe, and I'm going to talk about writing and reading on Islamic material culture in Europe. The image on the screen belongs to the manuscript of a book entitled Las Antigüedades de las Ciudades de España, a book published by the Spanish historian Ambrosio de Morales in 1575. Morales was chronicled to King Philip II, and he was some kind of father of archaeology in Spain. What we see here is a detail of a page of the manuscript that he was preparing to send to press. It is the beginning of his very long description of the ancient mosque of Cordoba. As we can see, the whole paragraph is completely full of substitutions, amendments, and crossing outs. Of course, there are corrections in other parts of the manuscript. That is usual when you are preparing it for the press. But the extent of these corrections is not normal. It does not happen in other parts of the manuscript. It shows that Morales was particularly hesitating while describing and explaining the mosque. That description was particularly complicated to him. He had a conscious concern as to the best way to word his presentation of the Mosque of Cordoba. As I said before, Morales was chronicled to King Philip II. He was writing at the moment of the biggest expansion of the Spanish Empire. He was writing some decades after the Christian conquest of Granada by the Catholic monarchs, and he was contemporary to the Morisco uprising in Granada, that uprising that led to the final expulsion of the Moriscos at the beginning of the 17th century. What was he hesitating about? The crossing outs show it very clearly. We can have a look at them from the top left to the right, and we can see, for instance, how he changed the word superb for strange and famous, and he had a lot of problems with that word, strange. He was inserting it, deleting it, inserting it away. He was also hesitating about the use of awe-inspiring or the references to how famous this building was. That was one of the largest and most sumptuous and strangest buildings, and then he changed that, and he introduced also comments about how the look of that building was very odd and how there was a lot of diversity in it. But there were also another kind of amendments in this text. Strange was a word that, according to Sebastián de Covarrubias' dictionary of 1611, meant singular and extraordinary, but also it referred to that which is not ours. And this idea that this building was not completely something belonging to us was something that moved Ambrosio de Morales to make other kinds of amendments. For instance, there was a sentence where he was saying that the building peculiarities were due to the building being a construction funded by the Moors and because the two Islamic kings had founded it. But then he crossed out these two uses of founded and replaced them with built and erected. Also, there were other amendments explicitly erasing the term mosque when referring to the building's original use. What we see here is that there are a lot of substitutions and crossing outs which are related to identity, to otherness, to belonging. He was hesitating about the use of words that were connected to those things. And these hesitations are not far away to what modern writing and reading on Islamic material culture in Europe has shown and still shows. Ambrosio de Morales was marked by the existence of his time's cultural canons. One of the most important was the classical canon. The mosque was foreign to that canon, and he had problems with that, mostly because he wanted to praise the building, and the mosque was not a Vitruvian building. Oddity and diversity came from there, but also the building was of the Christian canon. Modern writing also works under the shadow of a canon, or sometimes of multiple canons. Art history has been a long-standing canon, not anymore, but it has been. The divide between objects that could be studied as works of art and any other kind of objects is not rigid now. A great share of the Islamic material culture was not central to the art history canon. Textiles, for instance, calligraphy, metalwork as well. Art history deals now with all kinds of objects, and other disciplines such as cultural studies deal as well with objects that used to be the reign of art history. But in previous decades, we have seen how art history marked a divide there, and that it's still in the things we can read now. Also, post-colonial studies and colonial studies have been stressing identity, and it has been a canon for decades now. The relevant thing here is to acknowledge the existence of the canon and to understand its impact. Edward Said's Orientalism, a book from 1978, almost 400 years after Morales was writing, that book has been by far the most influential book in relation to the last decade's interpretation of the historical relations of Europe with Islam. This is a book with many virtues, a book that has changed scholarship in many ways. A very relevant one is the acknowledgement of the dependencies of academic writing with a larger political and cultural context. Orientalism has created a framework that has been largely criticized in relation to medieval and early modern Europe, but a framework that still runs. Above all, Said's claim that Napoleon's invasion of Egypt was the first time the Orient was revealed to Europe in the materiality of its text, languages, and civilization has been a statement particularly relevant. Since this meeting of cultures had previously taken place elsewhere in Europe, most notably in the Iberian Peninsula, in Venice, and in the Balkans, criticism of Said's claim has led to a detailed analysis of the contact between Christianity and Islam in medieval and early modern world. As John Toland has pointed out, the pre-modern vision of Islam in the West must not be automatically categorized in terms of a Saidian Orientalism, avant la lettre. To address this issue, it is paramount to assess the validity of defining all pre-19th century relationships between European and Islamic culture in terms of colonization. In general, the balance of power between pre-modern dominant and subaltern discourses was very different from today's. In this regard, many authors have argued that while a colonial explanation may be used to discuss the Crusades, it does not apply to the case of Christian dwelling under Islamic political rule or to Christian living in fear of being invaded by Islam, since they were in a position of inferiority. Among other problems that have been pointed out in Said's discourse, one is that his view of a monolithic Western is comparable to his critique on the Western's monolithic view on the East. Could we also speak of a certain Occidentalism here? Maybe. The lack of nuances is very important, and it is even more acute in relation to medieval and early modern sources, as Morales' hesitations show. One example of the need to not apply plain versions of post-colonial theory to medieval and early modern situations can be seen in the case of the Christian conquest of Islamic Spain. Even if we accept that a process of cultural colonization took place as a part of the Christian conquest of Al-Andalus, it is nonetheless evident that there is no direct equivalence between this process and the modern relationship between Europe and Islam. The work of many authors, Mercedes García Arenal, Miguel Ángel de Bulnes, among them, has clearly demonstrated that this difference is due to the particular conditions of alterity experienced in the peninsula. The Muslims were the other within, and this is of central importance if we are to understand the process of Christian conquest and the Moriscos' subsequent situation. Also, it is of central importance if we are to understand the Moriscos' material culture and architecture. As has been said, Said himself stated in his preface to the Spanish edition of Orientalism that the relationship between Spain and Islam could not be merely characterized as imperial. Identity is a matter central to our times. It is so in politics, in culture, and in academy. Identity offers a research angle which is extraordinarily rich and one that is relevant to society. Concepts as otherness and hybridity that depend upon the previous idea of identity have become central as well. And there are other interesting angles connected to material culture as a materiality or the global circulation of things, but often they appear in relation to identity. Identity seems like just the right angle when dealing with Islamic material culture in Europe. However, identity is a very tricky subject, one that tends very easily to the erasement of nuances and very commonly to the projection of modern ideas and modern expectations to the past, as we have seen while checking side with Morales. So I would say that it wouldn't be bad if, as Morales did in front of the Mosque of Cordoba, we would also stop for a while and hesitate about the use of all these ideas before sending our manuscripts to the press.